Hello and welcome to the Inspiring Thoughts podcast. Today we're exploring a topic that touches every organisation, every team and every leader, and that is conflict. We're not talking about the dramatic, explosive kind that makes headlines, but the quieter tensions that sit beneath the surface and bubble up until they boil. To help me unpack this, I'm joined by two truly exceptional guests. I have the privilege of working alongside both of you closely. First is Jenni, author of the new book Before It Boils and respected mediator. And alongside her we have Stephen Adams, CEO of Inspiring Cultures and co-author of the new book. Now, I know from experience that this book is not theoretical. It's grounded in conversations that you have in real life every day. And Stephen, I'd love to begin with you by asking, what was the spark behind this book that made you realise that it needed to be shared more widely?
Yeah, I think a really good question. So if I took my time back when I worked in the bank, there was so often that I saw people got caught up in procedures, processes, etc., which I saw damaging for them, the person that they were taking either agreements against out, but also people forget about it's their families that are involved from that point of view. So I wanted to do something that could showcase that actually if we lean into these conversations and really try and look at prevention and cure, we can really look after colleagues and their home life, etc. So, and it also sparked an interest. There was a good book I read from Daniel Priestley about key persons of influence. It also showed about how to showcase what you're trying to do and a good narrative. So that's what I want to do, is just say to people there's a better way and better conversations you can have, especially around conflict. And conflict gets a bad name, but it can have a good name.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true, actually. And the title itself, Jenni, it's so powerful. Before it boils, it really kind of captures that quiet sense of escalation. What led you to use that metaphor?
I think because most of the mediations that we undertake, they're not, like you said in the intro, it's not something big and bold that's happened that's caused a conflict. Most of the time, it's as a result of small things that have been built up, and sometimes over a number of years. So small things that start small and then escalate, and it's that underlying simmering tension that it creates, either between individuals or within the team in general, and therefore the organisation. And so what we're trying to say is, don't let it get to the point where it boils over. It's to try and stop it before that. And there will be occasions when it boils over, and we appreciate that. And there's also things in the book that can help when that does happen. But the premise is, if there's things that we do beforehand, we can stop it from getting to that point. So that simmering tension, we want to try and stop it from boiling over.
And I think, to add on that, really, really nicely put, it's about, we see these things happening, but we walk by them. Actually, we've got to go and have a chat with that person. Otherwise, it festers over time, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. It leads me into my next question. So why do you think leaders and HR teams so often delay in stepping in when that conflict does initially emerge?
Yeah, and I think it's just human behaviour. Yeah. So humans naturally don't like to pull somebody up if there's a problem or issue, etc. My strong belief is that if you choose to go into a leadership role, HR role, etc., L&D, where you manage people, you take the salary not just for the good times, but it's also about managing people. That's what you're taking the salary for. Where the book tries to help people is, actually, you can have some really good conversations with people to get them really look at themselves, work together, a stronger team. But you've got to realise when you step into the role, you have responsibilities. And people are funny to work with. We've worked with people over the years. We're not all the same. We're not robots. But actually, it's how can we really see those issues and actually lean into them quicker, rather than, we've seen it over the years so many times where it boils over and then people bring in HR, which is not their function. It actually should have been sorted out before. So that's what I say.
I think also added to that people are just too worried that they'll say something wrong and they'll make matters worse. Whereas they think, if I just ignore it, they'll figure it out between themselves, or it'll resolve itself in some way. It doesn't happen that way, but people don't, or managers, leaders don't step in because they don't want to set the cat amongst the pigeons and make matters worse. They don't want to fall foul of process or any kind of legality. They don't want a grievance being raised against them because they've dealt with it in the wrong way. So it's that snowball effect. And the problem is, unless you're given training on how to handle those conversations, you can make matters worse.
Yes.
And so it's a valid fear that they have to not step in case I get it wrong.
Yeah.
But if they've been trained in how to have those conversations well in the onset, then that wouldn't be an issue. There's so many mediations that we've done between us, you know, that could have been nipped in the bud.
Yeah.
They start from something really small and build, and then what happens is those people become really sensitive to each other. If it's, you know, conflict between two people in particular, everything they do then is picked up. Whereas if that conversation had happened at the beginning, look, you've said this, I don't quite agree with it, can we chat it through? You know, if it had been lent into at the beginning, it wouldn't boil over and get to that point which is often when people like us are then brought in to mediate because it's escalated. I mean, some we've done, like 8 or 9 year conflict is crazy. Like, and that could have started from something very small that could have been handled really quickly.
And that's one of the things that I sort of love so much about your approach. So what does prevention look like in practice?
So there are a number of strands to it. So one is around the leadership and exactly the point we just made around, you know, leaning into these types of conversations. One is about knowing different communication styles, knowing for the leader to know themselves and to know their team in terms of how they can approach things. And the book outlines sort of 5 pillars in terms of which are based around prevention and cure. So it'll also give tips on suggestions that they can do in order to prevent conflict from happening.
Yeah. And I think so. First of all, it's a skill and art to be trained in. So I think people just think, we've seen it so many times where people go, we're going to mediate, and they put 2 people in a room. The more introverted person just agrees to anything, and the more extroverted person will talk loud and be quite domineering. And then the line manager goes, well, that was brilliant because they agreed. It's not. That's festering. I think the other bit which in the book is about where we look at processes. Because you can have the best company in the world that wants to do restorative practice, really work with their colleagues to kind of influence conflict, but actually the practice that they've got tells the colleague go straight to grievance. Whereas in the book also we share with people actually there's better ways of doing it. So actually where you get a win-win approach for the organisation and the colleague. Whereas at the moment, if you took grievance, bullying, harassment, they were wrote in the 90s. They're so out of date. And organisations keep putting more and more on top to protect, whereas actually it's causing more harm than good.
Yeah, because I know that you both sort of challenge that traditional grievance-led process. So how does the kind of skills laid out before it boils, how would that differ?
So one of the things is to review the HR policies, and again this goes back to that fear of getting things wrong. If a complaint is raised or a query or a concern is raised, because the policy says if you've got an issue you have to raise a grievance, that's what happens. You know, HR will just follow the letter, and it's not HR's fault and it's not the leader's fault. No. It's because that's the way that the company are telling them this is how we resolve conflict in this organisation. What we're trying to say is that should be much further down the line. There are several steps before that in terms of having these conversations that can, because most of the time these people just want to feel heard. Yeah. They just want to know that there's an issue, and it's daunting for people. But if they can do that in a structured sense, you know, with somebody who's been trained on how to deal with these conversations, then they can bypass a lot of the problems that they face. So it's key.
Yeah, and I think also, Louise, train people in language. Really, so one of the simple things is stop asking people what they want, ask people what they need. So looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we've seen it before where people have the best intent. And I was going to say, I think it's still current. So 2020 CIPD did a research paper that 50% of the times line managers make things worse. not because they're malicious. It's their language, or it's a bit clumsy, and they try their best intent, but it doesn't naturally flow through. So we think about people trying to help their language. So really kind of, if you start asking people what they want and go what they need, you're going to get a much richer conversation, and the colleague will be accountable rather than a want is a hope or a desire. It could go anywhere. And it could be the colleague says, I want that person sacked. And then the HR and line manager will go, that's not on the agenda. Then they become part of the conflict. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the most compelling bits about the book, which I love, by the way, was the framework of the 5 pillars. And I just wondered if you could talk us through why they are so sort of interconnected.
Yeah, so the 5 pillars framework kind of developed naturally from the work that we do. So we started as a conflict resolution company primarily through mediation, being asked to support teams that were finding difficulties in the ways they were working together. And what we try to do is, once we've completed a mediation, is really figure out why it started, and we then try and offer recommendations to the organisation to say, look, this is what caused this. So those 5 pillars have sort of expanded from that. So what we tend to found is there are a few things in mediation that you'll know will always crop up. One is that leadership maybe haven't dealt with it. 2 is communication, because I'd say 95% of mediation cases are as a result of miscommunication or a lack of communication. So there's a whole piece there around communication and knowing your team and your preference styles, communication styles. So there's the leadership, which that sort of comes under that banner. The next one is coaching, and that's around personal development coaching. So knowing yourself and knowing your own management style, and how you then need to adapt your style in order to suit other people. That's one of the things that we work on people. It's also about working on your own brand and how you want people to perceive you, and how that can stop conflict from happening in the first place if you're your authentic self. We've then got the HR policy, which is what we just mentioned in terms of not jumping straight into grievance or harassment policies. And we've got facilitation and mediation. And so they're the pillars sort of evolved naturally based on the things that we were seeing, we were experiencing. Our clients were telling us, look, these are where the issues are. So we thought, people need to know about this. If people know about this, they can stop the conflict from happening in the first place. So that's kind of where it evolved from.
And I think also from us as an organisation and the book, we wanted to show through the pillars that one of the reasons that done with studies a while back is 2.4 million leaders each year are untrained. So we wanted to make sure that when we first started the company, anything we did had accreditations to it. So we're an ILM provider. So we wanted to show you there about people's qualifications and leaders that we go through. And then we brought in CPD verification. So any 1 day, 2 day training we do has an accreditation to it. So we can show actually the quality of work put in, and it's gone through a third party to show actually the standards we want. And that's the other part we brought is we want highly qualified people looking after. So whereas I said earlier about a mediator said, let's mediate, they weren't qualified and it caused carnage. So what we strongly believe at ICO is that, and through the book, is if we get more people qualified, they'll feel more comfortable, they'll have better, richer conversations. And that's what we want to shout out about in the book.
And that's the thing with the 5 pillars, they're so compelling because they're so human.
Yes.
And they work on kind of every level. And Jenny, I just had to come in and ask you quickly. I know that mediation is something that you speak about with like such clarity and conviction. What is it about mediation that makes it sort of such a transformative tool?
Honestly, I think it's its simplicity.
Yeah.
And that's not to say mediation is simple, because it's a difficult process to go through for the people involved. But often the people involved just need to have their voices heard. And once they've had it heard and they've been given that space to talk, freely and to raise their concerns. It's, that adage, it's a weight lifted off your shoulders, that they feel that they've had their say in a controlled environment. And also you can resolve things, like I said, things that have been bubbling for 7 or 8 years, we can resolve it in a day, and that's not to say you're going to walk out of the room as best friends, because that's unrealistic. But actually, in one day, we can completely change the way that these two people who are involved in it might view each other, or they might commit to working differently with each other. And that has such a ripple effect then on the rest of the business. Because, if there's two people in your team who have got a gripe with each other, everybody else feels it.
Absolutely, yeah.
You can't hide it. And it has that effect on, productivity, collaboration. There's so many touch points that it then has this ripple effect on. So I just think it's really powerful, that you can help people find a way forward that they wouldn't have been able to find if they were going to try and do it themselves. And just having that third party there is a reassurance for the people involved that this is not going to end up in a slanging match or, physical fight or anything of those types of things, which people genuinely think might happen. Yeah. So having that third party there is that little reassurance that, that it's going to be dealt with in a controlled way. And, touch wood, but we've got 100% success rate in mediation. So it just shows that it is successful. But back to the other point, it needs to be done at a much sooner point than it currently is. Yeah. Often mediation is recommended on the back of a grievance hearing or an outcome from a grievance appeal, or, and so they're then forced to go into a mediation. The damage has been done by that point, and you will get it to work, but ideally if you do that before, you don't have to go through that whole grievance route, which costs money, thousands of hours, stress, productivity drops. There's so many things that it impacts. So it's just about trying to do it at an earlier stage.
No, absolutely. And Stephen, I know that you've dealt with hundreds of leaders and HR managers, and that you've had these conversations kind of day in, day out. For people who are sort of dealing with grievances at that beginning, sort of simmering, uncomfortable phase, what would be sort of the first step that you'd encourage them to take?
So the first step is I'd just probably do a bit of research of having a structured conversation.
Right.
So when I hear people say, I wing it, that really worries me. Pure reason being that's not fair on the colleague you're working with. And a wing it is a 50-50 chance. I'm not a betting person, but I like good odds. So I think the first bit is, whether you've had it before, write down what you would like to talk about. So that's the first bit. And there's a model people can have a look at there called DISC, which is about description, impact, solution, and consequence. So it's a model, so people can Google that and have a look at it as well. I think the other bit is, it's not as bad as you think. Because if you come from a point of evidential rather than opinion, the conversation goes okay. It will be uncomfortable. I can't hide that. But actually, both of you, the other person, probably might know something's going on, but it needs to come out. Otherwise, you'll all be treading on eggshells.
Yeah.
And I admire people, I may not like it, but I admire people if they have a chat with me.
Yeah.
And I always look back at those leaders I've worked with over the years, have had a chat with me and gone, maybe have a look at this, have a chat through this, that kind of stuff. I may not like it at the time and I might feel embarrassed, but actually afterwards I go, do you know what, thank you for telling me. And that's early rather than leaving it later. Yeah. And I think just to add on that, the longer you leave it, human beings fill gaps. Yeah. So if there's a gap, human beings will fill it with their own behaviour, etc. They also become hyper-vigilant, hypersensitive.
Yeah.
So they're going to fill it. So if you don't deal with an issue, people are going to go, what did that email mean? What was that person talking to me about? They've not spoken to me for a while. They fill it with something that's not there. So we've allowed carnage to happen, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I would just say to people listening today, go and have a chat. It's not as bad as you think, but you've got to put the prep in.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in the book. It's just fantastic. But if there was kind of one thing that you wanted people, someone who just finished Before It Boils to take away and actually keep with them, what would that be?
Just that there's another way of dealing with conflict, you know, that it doesn't have to get to breaking point. It's a boiling point, you know, it can be resolved, and actually conflict in the workplace can be really positive.
Yeah.
It's really good to have difference of opinions, you know, and for people to see things from different viewpoints. So conflict isn't something to be scared of.
Yeah.
It just has to be dealt with in the right way at the right time. I think that would be the key takeaway.
That's great. It really reframes the way that we think about this.
Yeah. And I just to echo that. So I just, from the book, the big thing for me is about prevention and cure.
Yeah.
If people could take away one thing from the book, we can prevent a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Just have a look at the book, read through it. I would like to go, actually, I'm going to have a go and I'm going to try and prevent these issues. Because the bit for me, Louisa, we all know these things are going on.
Yeah.
That's the bit. So we're human beings. We know wrong from right. But what we do is we go, hopefully it'll get better. It doesn't. And the other thing, which will follow on from that, one bad person can destroy a team. All the stats prove it. So actually, you as a leader, HR colleague, L&D, etc., you need to have these conversations. Otherwise, the rest of your team, they're going to see it.
Yeah.
Their good behaviour will drop, or they'll leave, etc. So that's the bit for me of go and have a look at that prevention and go and do something about it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you guys so much. It's been such a great conversation. And it really sort of reflects why Before It Boils is such an important contribution to the way we think about conflict and leadership. And I know that you both live this in your daily lives and you carry it into your work. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much.
No, wonderful. Thank you so much, Louisa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny.